Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reality Check Podcast. We're going to be dealing tonight with the Iran issue. What's our next step with Iran? That is the question. Um, Everyone's aware, I'm sure, who's following this issue, that there has been an enormous amount of assets uh, for weeks going over there to that region surrounding the country. There have also been still to come carriers like the Gerald Ford who haven't arrived yet. It's to me, it's I look at it as it's either the mother of all saber rattling of all time, as they negotiate, if that negotiation is to give any real product, or it's just to give optics and to say, well, we tried diplomacy, they wouldn't agree, and we're going to have to go after them. Uh, I'm afraid myself. I look at this and I think Trump has kind of talked himself into a corner because he's done a lot of bad things are going to happen. It's going to be unfortunate for Iran, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost I don't want to get off too far into the Epstein files, but I'm looking at the same thing. A lot of hoopla, a lot of fanfare, and so far a nothing burger. Particularly, I'm concerned with all our assets out there. I want to first go, and tonight I'm joined by I am not your traditional military expert, Marcus, but nevertheless, he is our best military expert. So that is
It's
unquestionable.
it's
And then Raul, who also has one hell of a lot of knowledge about the military. Both gentlemen having far more than I do. Um, Being that you are a former squid, I wanted to ask you, or once a squid, always a squid. I wanted to ask you, as far as the naval, they are mostly naval assets, other than those on bases, right, on land bases. What kind of hardware are we looking at over there?
in terms of air assets, maritime assets, submarine assets.
Yeah, I have a list here that I can go into in a little bit from the map, but yes,
No, I'm not an expert on that. I just handle my focus was special operations, uh, but I think it's vast. What we're competing against is a nation that has been under an embargo since 1980. So it's using material, hardware that's at least 60 to 40 years old. And then it got repurposed. But but then again, to counter that is they have a substantive ballistic arsenal. But I'm kind of going ahead of myself.
go ahead, please.
Well, if I had to explain things, I would always like to go back a few years just to give context to everything. I think what was preeminent is the Iran-Iraq war that lasted from like September 1980 to August of '88. Uh, we It was a big shift from um, Iran being a U.S. ally to being a U.S. adversary. And then we went over to Iraq, and within a few short months, uh, there was a war started between two regional superpowers. And by the end of that, towards the start of the first Gulf War, the Iraqi military was the fifth largest in the world. It was the biggest regional superpower, eclipsing even Saudi Arabia. And that war, the Gulf War, started with the accusation of Kuwait was doing some slant or directional drilling, siphoning off oil in Iraq, and they thought they got permission, a green light, with the U.S. to do anything. But I remember at the time, while we were gearing up, the U.S. ordered like 100,000 body bags, 100,000 body bags in anticipation for it going in the wrong way for us. But it became like a 100-hour operation when we shifted over from Desert Shield to Desert Storm. and we pretty much annihilated. But that becomes a thing where we have to understand the difference between air supremacy and air superiority. Superiority is like, we have one up on the opposing side on whatever asset we have, and that's with air. Supremacy is like it's uncontested. So what happened in Desert Storm and Shield is we had air uh, supremacy. It wasn't contested, so we were just beating down their logistics, their ability to be mobile, and then when it came down to it, they were surrendering in drove. So for any outside observer, especially Iran, they realized that you cannot go head to head with the U.S. in a symmetrical warfare. It's not possible. If Iraq was the fifth largest army and they couldn't last 100 hours, what can Iran do? So they shifted their focus to asymmetrical warfare, which focuses on speed, surprise, not confronting directly. So then what they focuses on is their Quds force, uh, terrorism, but also understanding what the pressure points are. And the main pressure point is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is where 20% of all the oil is transited. Oil, and then there's liquid natural gas. So if you shut it down, theoretically, it's going to cause a seismic shift in oil prices and with the stock market, and then financing. So it would have like a cascading effect. So so then another issue when if we're going to get involved is our military logistic capability. We've neglected it for decades, and uh, and we witnessed that with Russia. Russia is known to not to be on par, but to have a military that could challenge the U.S. and it can't really uh, compete with Ukraine. It's been going on over 2 years, and it's ran out of tanks. It ran out of APCs. It's borrowing ammo from North Korea, and it's running out of bodies. So so how does it relate to us? We don't have a logistic capability anymore. I think we have like, from one expert, we have like 800 Tomahawk missiles out of a whole arsenal of 4,000 in its own uh, supply chain, but 800 Tomahawk missiles within the region. Uh, and the thing is, if we have a protracted conflict, uh, that nut goes fast within like a day or two. And part of the asymmetrical uh, 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 thought process for the Iranians is the swarming method. So if we have like the Iron Dome, like that was in Israel, they could shoot down X amount of drones or missiles. It could get overwhelmed through the swarming method.
Saturate the air.
Saturate the air, and we could be in that situation too, because like in the Strait of Hormuz, there's thousands of ballistic missiles. Some of them are antiquated, like silkworm Chinese missiles that
Yeah.
are like 40 years old. But when you have like 100 of them going at an aircraft carrier or a destroyer, one, it's an obsolete hardware, but two, a destroyer is like $1 billion plus, and then three, you get like uh, the political ramifications of losing a ship with all lives on board through a swarming method. And swarming is not uh, uh, unthought of concept. I mean, we did it in World War II in the Battle of Midway. We had antiquated torpedo bombers and planes going against Japanese Zeros, but we were using them as wave attacks to break down the capability of Japanese aircraft carriers, and we won today because the U.S. pilots made that sacrifice.
Yeah,
So in the Strait
well,
of Hormuz, it's with the ballistic mid to mid to distant missiles, they could reach Israel, they could reach Saudi Arabia. So that becomes an issue as well. And let me see. I'm trying to think of any other points I'm missing out.
well, you look
Uh,
for those points. I just wanted to interject that real
sure.
quick on Midway. I have a pretty good knowledge of Midway. I've studied it quite well, and it's interesting that those torpedo bombers were sitting ducks. Not a single. They sunk our Yorktown with torpedoes. Yet we could not sink any of their ships with torpedoes. They managed to veer out of the way or destroy the torpedo bomber before they were in launching position. That the Battle of Midway and was four Japanese carriers to three American carriers. And the end score, final score, we lose one carrier, they lost all four. But that was not due to the torpedo bombers. Those planes were the planes that destroyed the Japanese forces were the my favorite little plane from World War II, the Douglas Dauntless uh, dive bomber. That was the plane that did it. Amazing. A plane that wasn't even that fast. I think its max speed was like 320, but they did it, and it, as you said, in waves. So just a little
Yeah.
piece of history there.
Yeah. So I think in terms of like the pros and cons of a conflict, one method is like the slow and deliberate method where we don't have boots on the ground, but the boots on the ground would be uh, a pissed off populace, as we saw with X amount of protests. But the thing is, we took so too long. Pretty much, most of the protests has been suppressed, with a high kill count. But it takes a long time to gather forces into the region to have a strike capability. And conversely, uh, what kind of threw us off is like we lost Afghanistan because that could have been our back door on the east side of Iran. We had like multiple bases, including Kandahar. So that kind of screwed us. But one thing is that in terms of any diplomatic engagement, whether it's through force or through coercion or through trade, you don't want to box yourself in a corner. And what Trump kind of did is put himself in a situation where there's no exit strategy. He's going into a situation where it could have a global financial ramification with the Strait of Hormuz, and then it's a situation where we don't have the logistic capability for a protracted conflict. I mean, we might be good for like a week, maybe 2 weeks, but it depends on what we could do without partner forces. But then again, I'm playing devil's advocate. It's an issue of competency and capability. I mean, we've shown that we're competent and capable in Venezuela. What we did in the Iran nuclear uh, 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 plants, and but it's one of those. It goes kind of up in the air on that.
Marcus, what about just taking out, let's say, a protracted war definitely would be very much on our disadvantage and it would not be very popular here. And unfortunately, there's that to factor in. What about just taking out uh, targeted strikes on the head mullahs and where the barracks, the locations of the Republican Guard, the IRGC, where their majority personnel, the leadership is? wouldn't that be more feasible, as were the nuke sites?
Well, you're looking at like a missile screen of air defenses, and to get to the heart of Iran or going more towards the east of Iran, there's a lot of exposure with their missile screening. Then again, uh, they did things in Venezuela to dismantle uh, uh, through cyber through a cyber attack.
Right.
I've read somewhere that they're taking more of Chinese missile systems because they're not using U.S. GPS systems. They're using their own satellite capability because in a conflict, I don't know if it's like on and off switch, it would make it inaccurate if it went against the U.S. So it it's one of those uh, you have to kind of you can't put your toe in it, and you're gonna have to overcommit. And when you overcommit, it's gonna kind of bite you in a way as well.
Yeah,
So
the map that I put on the right there, and I don't know how well people can see it on a bigger screen, but that is the assets we have there now. And I'd like to hear from Raul next, and then maybe I'll just read from my. I have a copy of that map. I'll just read the different ships and the kind of armament we have there, which may be of interest to our viewers. Raul, what would you want to contribute on the current topic we're dealing with here?
Well, first of all, I think you mentioned at the beginning, Carlos, that the Gerald Ford was en route. No, the Gerald Ford is already there.
It's
It
already there.
transited through the Straits of Gibraltar, I believe, this past weekend, and I believe it is now, somewhere off the coast of Israel, probably, in the Eastern Mediterranean. And if this was actually what we're looking at here, believe it or not, this is I'm looking at up here. This is from 16 August 2024. So I don't know if this map is actually descriptive of what is there right now. Right? It looks like this is.
That's true.
Yeah, this is because you got the Theodore Roosevelt there, which is not there. This Theodore Roosevelt. Supposedly operating in the Gulf of Oman. Those figures, I think the map is antiquated, quite frankly. So let's let's recalibrate and tell you what is there. So the Gerald Ford, along with escorting destroyers and probably a submarine, transited through the Strait of Gibraltar, I believe, this past weekend. So it is probably on station off in the Eastern Mediterranean someplace. I believe the Iwo Jima is the amphibious ready group that's out there already. I've noticed that apparently they lost a sailor that fell overboard. Actually, a young Marine, not a sailor, but a young Marine that fell overboard. They searched for him for a long time, but they couldn't find him. And unfortunately, those things happen sometimes. And on the eastern side, in the Gulf of Oman, you have the Abraham Lincoln, which is there. It's another carrier strike group, along with accompanying, destroyers and probably their own submarine and whatnot. You also have some destroyers operating within the Persian Gulf, and you have quite a lot of naval assets, in and around that entire region, probably more than what we had, last time around. They've really built up the forces. There's also been an incredible amount of aircraft that have been flying out of the U.S. Into that area. We see this from all these fellows that sort of track the squawkers on aircraft, right? And so long as when they're in civilian airspace, they have them turned on so we can see the C-17s. We can see a lot of the military aircraft leaving. We'll see a lot of the fighters as well. When they're squawking with their transponders, we see them leaving. They sort of disappear for a while, then they pop up again. Some of the interesting things that have come across that is the fact that there's been an awful lot of C-17s, a lot of air defense capabilities being sent into the region to protect U.S. military forces in the region. So you've seen an awful lot of C-17s flying, that kind of equipment over there. You've also seen a couple of interesting aircraft, the AWACS, the older AWACS, which are basically Boeing 707s. We don't have a whole lot of them left, but most of them are over there now. I think about half of them are in theater right now. And they basically do, complete survey of the entire battlefield. They're the ones that have that rotating radar on top, and they can stay on station for a long time. There's also some aircraft that are battlefield communications aircraft that have been deployed from Europe. They're now loitering over the skies and, ready to relay information, capture enemy signals, that type of stuff. So there's an awful lot of things. And curiously, or maybe, the one thing that you haven't seen is the movement of a lot of ground forces. Right now, the amphibious forces, amphibious ready group will have U.S. Marines embarked, but that's maybe, a few thousand Marines at most. What you haven't seen is, the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne. I mean, big, division-sized troops being sent over there. So nobody is talking about a ground war in these next couple of weeks. This is obviously a very strong protective shield for the U.S. assets that are in country. There are an awful lot of aircraft there now. Probably half of the active airplanes in the Air Force are over there, and an awful lot of Navy aircraft as well. I mean, each carrier carries around 70 to 90 aircraft on board. Most of those are going to be fighters, F-35s, F-18s, those kinds, strike aircraft capabilities as well. So, you got two carrier strike groups, one in the Mediterranean, one in the Gulf of Oman, or just off, the Persian, off in the Indian Ocean or something, but nearby, ready to strike. A lot of those aircraft, we also sent F-22s over, right? Fighter aircraft. Apparently, most of those aircraft are sitting in the Saudi air base in the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. That's where I think most of them are. The U.S. has pulled back a lot of the aircraft that we had in Qatar and closer to Iran, sort of pushed them away from missile range. So I think what you're seeing is the prelude to obviously an enormous capability associated with strike aircraft.
Aerial bombardment.
Yeah, aerial bombardment, air superiority. I think what Marcus was talking about, and in fact there was an article I think in the Wall Street Journal today about that Raisin Kane, the chief of staff, is cautioning the president that, listen, we don't want this thing to go on for a long period of time because yes, we have expended a lot of ordnance and in Ukraine, and we've sent a lot of our stuff over there, and we've spent a lot of stuff, in the last few actions that we've had, throwing up Patriot missiles to help defend Israel, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not just a question of, like a logistical problem. It's also the fact that you don't want to use up all your stuff and then suddenly find yourselves, that the Chinese have invaded Taiwan, and guess what? We don't have enough missiles to sort of like take care of that problem. So, they got to be sort of judicious in their use of force while at the same time protecting American lives, protecting Israel. I'm actually I'm not as pessimistic, I think, as Marcus. I think that, I think a lot of damage was done to Iran before those B-2 bombers hit. And one of the things that were taken out were a lot of those anti-aircraft systems, right? We decapitated a lot of their senior military leadership. And I think that what the game plan is, if I were to speculate, what you guys have alluded to, strike against the Revolutionary Guard headquarters. try and decapitate, find out where the mullahs are and see if we can, kill them. I think that's the game plan. And what I've seen these last, 2 or 3 days is apparently now more protests on the streets. It's unbelievable the number of people that were killed, a few weeks ago in early January when they rose up. I mean, it's probably at least 6,000. Some people are saying it's more like, over 10,000 people that were slaughtered.
Or more than that.
Maybe even a lot more than that, right? So I think there's, what the game plan here is to try and destroy the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, to destroy the theocracy, and see if the people will take care of the rest. I think that's kind of the game plan.
Marcus, your name has been invoked.
No, it's not just about the conflict about going into Iran. It's about shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm a little pessimistic. I wouldn't say pessimistic. I would say cautious. I mean, there's more ways to approach a problem and solve it through other means. My take is, coming from special operations with the Strait of Hormuz, we could use EMP pulses to take out the electronics for their ballistic air to surface, or surface to air, or surface to ship capabilities. Because if you do that, and the thing about EMP, there's 3 classifications of EMP. There's E1, which is man-made and very short bursts, very intense and very targeted. Then there's like a E2, which is like a lightning strike, which is slower. And then there's an E3, which is like the solar flares, earth magnetic issues that creates an EMP. So my take is, if to handle the pain point is the Strait of Hormuz. There's no doubt about it. And if we could do that, tackling with an EMP pulse, or, like Trump is going to disclose about aliens, we might use some hybrid alien technology.
Well, listen, that article that our friend Harrison, I think, posted the other day, that I hope you saw, but it talked specifically about, and it sounded like really sci-fi. It was like a link to a video that sounded very polished, like, it was almost like a fantasy. But I asked Harrison, I said, listen, I mean, is this stuff for real, that what this guy's talking about in this video? And Harrison said, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, like you said, Hollywood, but, the point is that the U.S. has in fact tested electromagnetic pulse weapons system on board some of these destroyers, and it has the ability to do exactly what you're describing, Marcus, to destroy not just one, but entire swarms of drones with sort of a horizontal, sort of narrow beam that can, cluster for, because what happens is the further out it goes, the beam starts to get dispersed, right? So you got a lot of energy up front, but the further out you get, the more, the wider the beam becomes, like a flashlight, right? So those electromagnetic pulse weapons, you have to wait until the drones are fairly close to the ships in order for them to be effective. And then if for some reason there's a few stragglers left over, then you can engage them with the the very costly missiles, or you can use the Sea Whiz, those Gatling guns that they have on board, right? So that seems to be the thought process in terms of especially addressing your point, the Strait of Hormuz. What happens if these guys just start unleashing drones left and right? So yeah, I think that's a threat to the flow of oil, but I think it's more important to protect our ships, quite frankly, than have a few oil tankers sink or whatever. I mean, hopefully not in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, because that would be a disaster if if you had that choke point sort of choked off, if you will.
Right.
But look, I'm not that pessimistic. I mean, maybe I'm being naive here, but I think we caused an awful lot of damage, last time around. We did, in fact, take out a lot of their air defense capabilities. So, there's a fairly clear path. The Chinese air defense systems don't really concern me that much. Apparently, there were some of those in Venezuela. It didn't seem to work very well, the Chinese or the Russian for that matter. I think we're very quickly learning that, you can have very fancy systems. And even as the Ukrainians have pointed, I mean, the Ukrainians have done a number on the Russian air defense systems, very, very expensive systems with all this drone technology that they've developed, right? So I think that it's going to be an air war. I think there probably are some special operations forces in the region, not just Navy SEALs that you would expect given the naval presence there. But I did see a report that there were a couple of 757s that are sort of classified, secret squirrel type of stuff that are specially modified to carry like tier 1 units to zones, and apparently those two aircraft have been very busy lately. So they've been flying obviously some folks over there. Maybe there is some sort of a special mission being planned to capture or kill some Ayatollahs or something. I don't know. And Israel's obviously on full alert as well.
For me, I'm always a proponent on don't use the conventional forces to take charge because they tend to screw it up and make it protracted. I prefer CIA special operations combo. I mean, we took down Afghanistan in like 90 days, and then it shifted over to conventional, and we were there for like 20 years. So my take is if it's going to be that slow rollout of pressing forward, it's not going to be like very dynamic because we have to have assets to coordinate with the partisans or the pissed off people, and I don't think that I mean, as I mentioned earlier, that's our boots in the ground.
Yeah.
We kind of missed most of that opportunity, but I'm sure it could get regained if they knew we had their back with like surgical strikes. But we could augment like with special forces, the force multiplier with the partisans, and there's like on coming to the east to the west side, it's not an issue because the ones who protested early were the Kurds, and they could help create a momentum going, and north is like the Azerbaijanis, and then I think there's like a
Baluchistan.
Yeah, there's a group there that are no fans of the regime.
Yeah.
So there's but it's the idea of maintaining a momentum where it becomes insurmountable because if you remember watching like the news about all the protests going in Iran, you hear like other news about like some of them were making exit strategies, like shifting money into Swiss banks, and then trying to go to like some Central or Western European countries or to Russia. Now that kind of died down a bit, but believe in creating momentum, believe in creating a spark, and fanning the flames to be an accelerant. And the accelerant before was the embargo squeeze. The people at the bazaar, the shopkeepers, fanned the flames to create.
That's how it started.
The protests.
Right. I wanted to also, I've been hearing the last little while, you guys have detailed a very good big picture of this whole thing. And I wonder to myself, how much of that big picture was Trump shown accurately? How much did the Joint Chiefs or the people that advise him make him painfully aware of those factors that could escalate or could get out of hand, as well as the fact that we have expended, I think both you guys know what the term go Winchester means. Nobody wants our military to to be Winchester. And for those who don't know that, that's a term when you're out of ammo. I'm Winchester. Uh,
Well, I
that
mean,
how aware would he have been of that, and would he have maybe not done the things he's done had he been more aware, or is he aware and he's saying, "Fuck it, I'm going. We're gonna go for it."
I think with any group, it's not an echo chamber unless you're like North Korea. But you have a faction that are doves, a faction that are hawks, and you get like the ones in between. So, and we know who some of the hawks are and some of the doves. Like JD Vance would be more of a dovish or more of a cautious approach. Rubio would take, and Tulsi Marco Rubio would take a more of an aggressive approach. Tulsi
Yeah,
Gabbard take a more of a cautious, dovish approach. So, you
it's
know,
interesting. You just mentioned three people, two of whom have been in the military. They're more cautious. The other one has never been in the military. He's more how about the Hawk? He's more like go get them and kick their ass. It's
well,
interesting.
out of the three here, Raul mentioned I take a pessimistic approach. I would say I take a little bit more of a cautious approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, listen, I think, one thing that caught my eye the other day, Marco Rubio was asked about, how the negotiations were coming. And, Marco usually, he doesn't mince words. And he says, listen, man, part of the problem here is we're dealing, with a theocracy, right? I mean, we're dealing with religious zealots, right?
Who
Um,
worship death? Who
yeah,
worship
it's
death?
hard to sort of negotiate and tell them that, they got to get rid of their nuclear weapons and they got to, give the people a voice because they're not accustomed. I mean, they've been running a theocracy since 1979 in Iran, and to tell them that the party's over is not something that they want to hear, right? So I think, look, and we talked about this before. We talked about it when the whole Venezuela thing was going on. You have an enormous amount of U.S. military assets in the area. Okay, you either have to use it or it starts to degrade the longer you're there, right? I mean, morale starts going down.
Yes.
Maintenance issues start cropping up. So you can't sort of keep the trigger cocked indefinitely. You either have to pull the trigger and let shit happen, or you have to sort of then you get into this whole grind of you have to send replacement ships because you got a crew that's burned out or whatever. Now, the tempo ever since Trump came into power for the Navy has been at an all-time high, and they've done a fantastic job. These young sailors are more resilient than we give them credit for, and the Marines on these amphibious ships as well. But the reality is you either got to you use it or you lose it, right? And I think again I get back to we did a lot of damage to Iran last summer, and it wasn't just the destruction of their nuclear capability or fuel making capability. It was also an incredible amount of air defense systems. And if you'll recall from last summer, that we got a glimpse or we got news that there were actually Israeli troops operating in Iran. Okay,
Yeah.
special
Setting the table.
operations guys. The Israelis, there's a lot of Persian Jews that have found exile in Israel, right? And the Mossad apparently has a very robust capability, as we saw them, killing some of those nuclear scientists. They knew exactly where they lived. They hit their their apartments. They know where these people are. They've been tracking them for years. I think the Mossad has a very good handle on, what is left. What are the capabilities that the Ayatollahs have? Who's running it? Where it's being run from, and I think that getting back to what Marcus mentioned, I think you can use special operations forces, probably working hand in hand with maybe some Persians that the Israelis have been training or arming for some time now. They might come out of the woodwork. Who knows, right?
I mean, what we need is a partner or a coalition of the willing, like what Bush Senior did.
Yes.
And Bush Jr. did. Because there's a lot of, if you look at the map, there's a lot of, there's no allies. Maybe there's strategic partners. And even though we have some of them are strategic partners, some of them says, no, you can't go through our airspace, like Saudi Arabia and UAE. It becomes like a very touchy issue, with other Muslim countries. So
yeah,
that's one thing. Another thing that's overlooked, and it's easy to overlook, is
the Israelis can go over Syria. Syria, they destroyed all of Syria's air defense systems. So the overflight would come from Israel over Syria and straight into Tehran, once you get past the Syrian airspace.
Understood. Another thing is what's overlooked is the follow through, the after effects. The phrase that nature abhors a vacuum always ring true. Look what we did in Libya. We took down Khomeini when he was Gaddafi when he was our ally, and now it's now you get public slave trades. You get like Al-Nusra or
Al-Nusra,
is and other terrorist groups out there prominent in Libya. Syria got taken over by an extremist. You get Iraq,
yeah. We took down Saddam, and what we got?
Follow through. We kind of screwed. Then there's Afghanistan. So what we need is, if we're conquering and pushing forward, we should have people or systems in place to make sure nothing fills in that vacuum. Like we did in the occupation of Japan and Germany. We made sure there's no vacuum. We occupied it. We controlled it. We have like a governorship. I mean, I'm not saying we do that, but we should have things in place so there's no third-party actors or other nation states taking advantage of this. Because when you look at the map, there's Iran, and next door is Afghanistan. I'm just saying.
Well, I look at it this way: with when Trump was going around a few months ago, and they were chasing him with the McDonald's vehicle and all that in those countries, those fancy Arabs with the fancy garb and the beautiful, perfect marble and the pillars, they're all about their wealth. Those are monarchies. And I thought to myself, oh, great, you can flatter the man with you're the hottest country in America and shake hands and smile and all of that shit. But in the end, when it comes time to commit, they ain't committing. And that concerns me. They're fair weather friends, or they're good for the optics and the selfies or whatever, or the video moments, but they're not committing troops. And even worse, even the only thing to me worse than saying we can't send you any military assets, you can't fly over our airspace. Who are they afraid of pissing off?
Well, another thing is, I look at it as a case of missed opportunities. We have another opportunity moment to give Kurds their own country, because in Iraq, as of January of this year, we don't have any U.S. forces in Iraqi federated lands. The only U.S. troops assets available is in Kurdish territory of Iraq.
And those were pulled out the other day, I believe.
But my take is it's another opportunity to have another chess piece, a geopolitical chess piece, to recognize a small Kurdish state that they could, if we make a push towards Iran, the Kurds could carve out a state in that vacuum. and we don't have.
I don't think that's going to happen, Marcus. I'm sorry, man. I think the
I don't know.
Kurds are going to be
You got
sold. I think the
Turkey.
Kurds are going to be sold down up the river, whatever you want to call it again. I think the Syrians have been pushing hard against the to reestablish control over those Kurdish territories. I think Trump is willing to I hate to say it, but I think Trump is willing to sacrifice the Kurds. And I think what I'm sort of saying is that the Turks might in fact be looking to establish some sort of a buffer zone between themselves and Iran, so that they don't get any spillover over their borders, right? And that would also entail, taking advantage of the fact that the Kurds are probably now in a debilitated state. I don't know.
Well,
I'm willing to push the Kurds
but you brought up a good
armed
point.
and a serious threat, but I think that that's not going to happen, unfortunately.
But you also brought up a good point that was left out of the equation. Is like, I mean, we take a myopic view, like a one state actor view, the U.S. being monopolar, but we're looking at a regional area with
Sure.
regional actors, where each actor in that area have their
Yeah.
own self-interest. So you mentioned about Turkey,
Israel,
having there's Israel having a say, uh, Pakistan, they're right there, Afghanistan. So there's a lot of like I said, nature abhors a vacuum. So we have to be responsible on how we deliberate our movements into Iran if we attack. And my solution is, give the Kurds their own state.
Yeah.
It'll be pro-Western, pro-US. A good check.
Talking about having people in Iran to sort of, be there after things get blown up. And not to shift the subject here because that's not the topic for tonight, but look what's going on, Venezuela. Yeah, we got Delcy Rodriguez and, but, the people that ran Venezuela into the ground, yeah, Maduro's gone, but all those bad actors are still there. Yes, they're following U.S. orders, okay? But a lot of people are saying, now what they're going to do is they're just going to drag things out and hope that in the next election, a Democrat will come into power and they'll, look the other way and they'll be able to come back and continue, doing the same shit over and over again. That's what you're hearing. And in Cuba, they don't have anybody identified right now, right? I mean, supposedly Marco Rubio is talking to the grandson of Raul Castro, like a 41-year-old functionary, I think, in the government, about possibly, taking over. But listen, if all we're doing is getting rid of Maduro and getting rid of the Castros and getting rid of
Khomeini,
the Ayatollahs, okay, but then leaving behind all of their buddies, okay, what has that done? What has that done for us, right? I mean, how much better off are we, right? I don't think that's what Marco Rubio wants. I think Marco Rubio wants a free and democratic Cuba. I think he wants the same thing for Venezuela. And I think, we need the same thing in Iran. I mean, and in order to do that, okay, it may take more than just a quick in and out, bombing campaign, cause a bunch of damage, kill the Ayatollah, destroy the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and then leave a bunch of, bureaucrats there to sort of figure it out, some sort of a strong man or something to run things. But, it's going to be a mess. I mean, Venezuela is, it's getting oil now, at least oil revenues, right? Trying to stabilize the country. But this guy, for example, Diosdado Cabello, he's got his militias. That guy should have been taken out a long time ago, right? But he's still down there. He's causing trouble. It's messy.
Before I go to you, Marcus,
All this stuff is messy. It's not, it's not as clear cut as we want it to be. Bomb the hell out of them, and the unicorns, and the sun comes out the next day, and the unicorns are running around, and everybody's back to normal. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Marcus.
2 points. One is a flight of fancy, but I think it'll be a funny thing. You mentioned about who could be the next person in charge of Cuba. Imagine Marco Rubio say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to run for president of Cuba."
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure he
listen,
could.
he
I'm
can be the
sure he could
governor
win it.
general, you know.
I'm sure he could win it, and that'll be a I mean, you heard it in this podcast, so I think that'll be like a funny mental exercise just to kind of talk about that as a hypothetical. And number two, one thing you pointed out is there's no change when you take out the heads. But one lesson learned is that sometimes with change, it has to be very gradual. And a good example would be Iraq. I think it's like Brenner,
Right, right,
who's
right. No, they got rid of the entire apparatus, the
yeah,
entire
got rid of the bat, made
the
the
Ba'ath
bath
Party. They got rid
illegal,
of
The
the
Ba'ath
got
entire
Party.
rid of
Ba'ath
the
Party, and the
military.
country was falling apart, right? And it led to all that chaos afterwards, right? I think the U.S. learned that lesson. That's what they're trying to avoid right now. But I guess my point is, great. I understand the strategy. You know, you don't want to create another sort of post-Iraq environment where you did away with every Ba'ath Party member and the country fell into disarray. On the other hand, okay, um, sooner or later, you need to introduce, in my mind, in Venezuela, they have a democratically elected leader. Her name is, Maria Corina Machado. She's and I'm sorry, Edmundo Gonzalez, her stand-in in the past election, but you have the Vente Venezuela party of Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado are in fact legitimately elected, according to most countries of the world who recognize that the last election by Maduro was fraudulent. So
Yeah.
long as the U.S. is backing Delcy Rodriguez, which is an illegitimate, person in power, okay, because she was elected as Maduro's vice president in an illegitimate election, according to practically every civilized country in the world. There's that's not right. I mean, it's gotta be fixed. You got if you don't want to have, for whatever reason, Trump doesn't think that Maria Corina Machado is strong enough or has enough backing. Fine, but insist on free and democratic elections before year end, right? And if you, Delcy Rodriguez, and her brother and Diosdado Caballo are not in favor of that, then you know what? You guys are out, or we'll take you out. All right.
Yeah, but you guys are out means that they have to be assassinated. Here's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
problem.
I mean,
This country,
look, if you want to get on an airplane and get the hell out of Venezuela, that's
or we
fine.
whack
Get the
you.
hell out, okay?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to kill you. We're going to get rid of you. We're going to, decapitate you. We're going to do something to you. We're going to come and get you the same way we did Maduro, right?
Yeah.
That's the threat that's hanging over their head. If you're going to do that in Iran, you got to be prepared to follow through on it, right?
Well,
And in Cuba as well, right? I mean, Cuba, I'm not that concerned about, man. I think, look, that country's in such dire straits right now that I hope to God that Diaz-Canel and Raúl Castro realize, the game is up, man. I mean, it's just give it up, man. Just get on an
Rubio should run
airplane,
for
get the hell out
president
of
there.
Cuba, go someplace else, take a couple of $1 million with you, whatever, all right, and just give it up and let let's restore freedom and democracy to Cuba. Let's start rebuilding it. It's going to take an awful long time to rebuild it, right? But Venezuela is a different story, man. Venezuela, you have, a lot of people that were part of that whole Bolivarian, revolution and are still riled up and are still, a lot of them are still being paid off by Cabello and other elements. It's a more fractured society. It's also, a much bigger country population-wise, right? Cuba is 8 million. It's about 9 million, 9 million people at this point. The average age of a Cuban today is 43 years old. Okay, it's an elderly population. You don't have a whole lot of young people on the streets willing to die for the cause because they're all, either in God's waiting room, waiting to die, or they're senior coming into senior citizenship or pretty soon, or the late 40s, early 50s that are just not going to go out there and take up arms.
I see a recurring theme here, and it doesn't matter what theater, whether it's Latin America, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Europe, there's an overarching reality that I see president after president after president of this country refuses to accept. You cannot impose democracy, and you cannot coax an enemy into leaving. We are so far removed from the era when we did what we did in Germany. A dictatorship doesn't leave unless you kill a whole shitload of people. And today there is not the appetite for that. There is not the attention span for that. There is not the political will for that. And that is a problem that any president, any commander in chief ignores at their peril.
Yeah.
And it does, you could plug what I just said into Iraq. You
But
could
Carlos,
plug that into
I'll tell you
Iran.
one thing, man. You got to applaud the fact, okay? And you saw it in Venezuela a few years ago. People did take to the streets, okay? But then it was crushed. You're seeing it now in Iran. People have taken to the streets and they've gotten, slaughtered in mass
Yeah.
numbers, okay?
Yeah.
And in Cuba, you saw that a couple of years ago. There was a sort of a minor uprising a few years ago, but that was crushed. Now you're not seeing it because so many of the young people have left. And like I said, you just got a lot of old, tired people left. And one thing that I want to point out, and this is, a bit of an aside, but I believe it, because, and Carlos, you can relate to that. Marcus, I don't know if you can, but, I know Carlos will relate to that. Cuba fought a battle of independence against Spain, okay?
Yes.
And it
120
was
years
a
ago.
bloody battle, right? It was
Yes.
it was a very lengthy battle. I mean, people think
With
of the
US help.
Spanish-American War. That was sort of the third war that they had over like 30 or 40 year period, right? I mean, the breaking of the bonds between Spain and Cuba actually took several decades, right? And there were several wars that were fought before Teddy Roosevelt showed up with his Rough Riders. And the Cuban revolution, the Mambisas, as they were called, those guys, literally fought with machetes. They would sneak into Spanish camps at night with machetes, okay, chop people up, steal their guns and their artillery, and that's how they began the revolution, right? And my point to this is, whether it's Cuba now or Venezuela now or Iran right now, one thing those three countries have in common is that they were all disarmed by their governments, okay? There are no, absent maybe a few hunting rifles in the mountains someplace in Iran, there are no, privately owned weapons in Iran. The Venezuelans did the same thing. They confiscated all the privately owned weapons. The Cubans
Yes.
did the same thing, okay? So you can go out and you can protest, okay? But when they start shooting at you, you got nothing to shoot back with, man.
You just stated
And
my
that's
case.
exactly what happened in Iran. I mean, I was watching the Wall Street Journal, okay? They had like a video segment there where they interviewed, I think, 3 or 4 protesters that were actually there, only one of whom showed his face because he's now left Iran and he says he's never going back. So he courageously was actually filmed saying what he was saying. But they showed an image there. These guys showed up with 50, 12.7 millimeter, which is basically 50 caliber. Okay. They showed the casing. The casing of 50 caliber is about, it's a pretty big casing, right? I mean, it's very evident what it was, right? You got people being mowed down with 50 caliber machine guns. I mean, who can fight against that if you don't have, you're going up against people with 50 caliber machine guns, AK-47s, and what do you have? Sticks, So the reason I mentioned this is, damn, man, I've always been a believer in the Second Amendment, and what I've seen these last, couple of years is kind of reinforced that more than ever, man. I mean, an armed society is important to maintain a check on abuse of a government and keep dictators from seizing power.
And there's a reason that those societies have been disarmed, because they know that a disarmed society cannot from within overthrow a tyranny. They have to be done from the outside.
It's part of the game plan. We take power. The Russians the same. Listen, you can't have I mean, and think about it, man. I mean, here in America, man, I mean, we're now coming up on about, I think, 400 million firearms privately owned. I think there's
More than
maybe
the population.
okay.
And I believe that Trump's bluff has been called. These despots, these tyrants are calling Trump's bluff. They're saying you can come in here and you can take out some figurehead or take out a dictator, but we're still here. We ain't going anywhere, and we don't think you got the balls, nor the wherewithal, nor the support in your country to come in here and take us out. That's what we think. And I I don't want to be pessimistic. I
I
may
don't
be
know,
more
man.
realistic.
I think, look, I think even without guns, okay, it comes to the point, where you have every single day people, and by the way, I mean, they're operating under, incredible pressure from sanctions, right? Um, and I think it's not just the military strikes. We haven't even talked about the sanctions that Iran is facing, right? Um, you know, if we basically shut off their ability to export oil, because we've destroyed all of their terminal facilities to pump oil out of the country. Okay, you can. I think the formula with Cuba and perhaps the formula with Iran is we are just going to put, in the case of Cuba, they're not going to bomb Cuba, right? I don't think it's going to happen. We're not going to land troops in Cuba, okay? But they got maybe a few more days, maybe a couple weeks at most of fuel left on the island. Okay. Then you go into Stone Age territory. What do you do then? All right, guys, what's your game plan now? Okay. And we can send all rice and beans, lots of humanitarian assistance, but how are you going to deliver it? Right? How are people going to heat up the food? How are they going to cook the beans, the rice? How are they going to do all this stuff, right?
And when those people get pissed and they take to the street and say, "I can't heat my fucking rice and beans," what are they going to do? They're going to mow them down.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. But if you come out, you can. I don't know. But and I think in Iran, the combination of not just military actions but sanctions as well, right? I think the mullahs got scared in early January. They saw literally, and by the way, the protests were not just in Tehran. They were all over the country. Okay.
Multiple cities.
Yeah, in multiple cities, right? And so, and in this Wall Street Journal article that I referenced, one of the guys that they interviewed was saying that he was left his house. He was walking down the street, and he realized that he was walking next to like a 70-year-old neighbor of his, a woman, and he asked her. He says, "Look, what, I really applaud you. It's fantastic. I mean, I didn't expect to see you out here. Why are you coming to this protest?" And the lady was like, "Look, I'm fed up like everybody else." She says, "I'm 70 years old. The only thing I have left to give is my life, and I'm ready to give it up." And I think there is that tipping point in a society, and I think Iran is really, really close to it. Okay, because you saw already they lost thousands and thousands of people, and yet here we are a couple of weeks later, and they're again protesting on the streets, right? I mean, what happened? I mean, they killed thousands of them. They cut off the internet for about a week so nobody could see the murders that were going on. Okay. But people are fed up, and people are fed up in Cuba. My worry in Venezuela is that most of the people that were fed up, and in Cuba too, have already left, right? The people that are still there are either the believers, okay, and in Venezuela, for all the poverty and all the misery, there's still some food, right? I mean, it's not like starvation, mass starvation. I mean, they're malnourished or whatever. But I don't know, man. But there comes a point where even without weapons, okay, personal weapons, it becomes too much, man. I mean, people just like that 70-year-old lady. What the fuck, what do I got to live for, right? I mean, may as well give my life in the hopes that there's a better future for my children, for my grandchildren, because my work here is done, type of stuff.
Marcus, what do you think are the chances that the conventional rest of the military of Iran would turn on the IRGC? Because they're different entities.
Kind of look at like the Soviet Union. You have the military, then you have the political aspect, the commissars, where even though the military is is a force to be reckoned with. It's been embedded with commissars where, they could be recalled and they could have like an officer purge, and they could all be killed. So it's one of those. I don't know how embedded IRGC, but there's another aspect of it that's embedded with the military where they're not free to act. They're kind of like constrained, because somebody's looking over the shoulder. I'm not too savvy with that, but that's my take. If it's a totally repressed regime, they're going to have security measures in place where the military cannot act independently.
Well, it would obviously it'd be a coup. It would not be, yeah, it would not be a peacefully acting independently. It'd be a coup. It'd be the military turning. Isn't that what happened in Syria?
Uh, there was some breakaways, and there were some breakaways in Libya as well, of where there was a military coup, and it got fractured. Yeah, I mean it's possible, but
Yeah, but we could help. We could certainly help that equation if we took out a lot of IRGC and we took out some of the mullahs. I think that would be, to me, that seems, as we start getting ready to conclude here, I think that would be probably a more achievable and not protracted, and certainly not boots on the ground. Because I just, my concern is that if this thing goes nowhere, that Trump is going to lose a lot of face, and I think the voter base of the GOP is going to also say, what now, once again, and for what? And I worry about the Republican voter base has a serious turnout problem and apathy. And that, why, I don't know, but maybe because they're looking at a do nothing Congress. Uh, and which ironically tonight we're going to see the do nothing half of the Congress. They're going to be going to Mark Ruffalo or Robert De Niro's place or whatever the hell that is. You know,
yeah.
Mm.
Should we make our final points?
let's make our final points. I think that, well, I'm going to just reiterate mine. I think that Trump, pretty much, he's got to put up or shut up, at least in Iran being tonight's topic. He's got to get some scalps, because if he took all those assets over there and comes back, as they said in The Godfather 1, with his dick in his hand, that's not going to help him at all. That's going to be a catastrophic, and they're gonna mock him. They're going to talk about a waste, and they're going to say this president is willing to waste assets, precious assets, blood and treasure, to do nothing. That's my, and God, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there is some action.
I don't think that's going to happen, bro. I really don't think that that's.
I hope not.
Yeah, I don't think that's even in the realm of the possible. Okay, I think Trump is very consistent, and he has shown. Okay, I am going to deploy an enormous amount of military force to get you to do things the way I want you to do things, and if you don't do it my way, we're going to use that force to inflict harm on you. Okay. We saw it last summer. He fucking bombed the nuclear facilities in Iran. We saw it now in Venezuela. Huge military buildup. Went in there, snatched Maduro, broke a bunch of shit, and killed all the Cubans that were guarding Maduro, and installed a puppet dictator to run the country. And so I don't think Trump is going to just sort of say, well, gee, they wouldn't sign the agreement that I wanted, we're just going to back up and call it a day type of stuff. No, I think they will get spanked. I think the question tonight was just, how badly are they going to get spanked? What are the threats that Iran faces? I'm sorry. What are the threats that the U.S. faces, that the region is facing? But I think the president will in fact act, and I'm not. I think, look, there's always a risk that things go wrong, right? A plane gets shot down over Iran, that type of stuff, and whatnot.
A base gets hit.
Gets resolved. Listen, my wife is telling me that I got some chicken that's burning over here, so I got to run.
All right. Well, you go ahead and tend to your chicken. Marcus, give me your parting thoughts, and then we'll end
Right
off
on.
tonight.
Yeah, I think to increase our viewership, I think we should go naked. Raul, I think you look good with nipple rings. Carlos, you look good with a
I'm out
leather
of here, guys.
profile.
I got a
And
chicken that's
then at
burning
the
over here.
end, we should have like stupid penis
Deal with the
jokes.
chicken.
Like we have like helicopter, and then another week we'll go with like a watch or a mouse on the trampoline. And then a few weeks after that, if the viewership is not getting anywhere, then we should like go a little gay. And then because it worked for Disney, it worked for Netflix, it worked for Amazon, it worked for
Yeah,
Star
let's
Wars.
have the Obamas run our script. How about that?
I'm just joking.
Oh,
It's a joke, but
I know that. Yeah, we'll go the Jeff Epstein route. Well, it's been interesting. I hope Raul has no culinary disasters or kitchen catastrophes. Thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. And remember, if you like what you see, like and subscribe. And let's see if in 2 weeks, when our next episode comes back, returns, if there's going to be something more positive to report on this issue.
it'll be
So to
interesting to
everybody,
see to watch Trump's State of the Union, how it kind of I don't know deviates or kind of complements our podcast. So
I think he's been told mostly don't go too heavy on that and stick to the affordability and issues that are still ticking off some voters. But we'll see. We'll see.
yeah.
All right. Well, you guys, to our audience, we bid you good night. Take care, buddy.
All right, bye.